Here it comes. All right. Well, theoretically. But come on.
Presenting Benny Goodman and his music.
Okay, there we go then. Morning, Christine. Hey, Martin. Hey, David and Karen. Hey, Gene. Hey, Octavio. Hey, Emily. Hey, Sue. You guys missed some rainy fun yesterday out in the cemetery. Hey, Georgia. Hey, Becky. Hey, Gladys. Thanks, Susan. Hey, Ian. Morning, Katie. Hey, Gene.
Benny Goodman, ladies and gentlemen, the man with the
Hey, Joanne. Hey, Barbara.
band who purveys assorted rhythms, all danceable. In the
See, and those came out of order for me, so I got Adam even. Morning, Atham.
Berlin's greatest hits.
Hey, John. Hey, Judy. Karen, that's a bummer. I had a COVID test yesterday for the Talking Head stuff. I came out negative. And my IRS letters were just rehashing data I already knew, so a couple of bright spots. Then the new Muna album. Hey, Denise. Hello, Marie. Man, I am sleepy today, I gotta tell you guys. David, that sounds like more fun than the golf anyway. Yeah, Sarah, if you need to come camping. Hey, Jordana. Morning, Amy. There's great camping in Chicago. Hey, Heather. Hey, Renee. Hey, Linda. All right, Mary. Man, what a drought we were having this time last year. Even worse than this year. This is when this footage below me was taken. Hey, Marie. Hey, Dina. Keely, that's not really the kind of camping we're talking about here. I don't know that this kind of camping would really make a great Mysterian trip. Yeah, grass, and we've had enough of a drought this year, but last year, you look how bad this was. Certainly at bars around Andersonville, I have already, in the last several months, noticed an influx of people from Florida and Texas, refugees essentially, looking for someplace safer to live. Than Abbott DeSantis country, anyway. Hey, Laura. Hey, Amy. Glad to have you. A while ago, I met a couple who moved up from Florida named Mike and Gloria. They had never seen All in the Family, and apparently nobody had mentioned that to them yet. These kids nowadays with their backyardigans and their Richard Marx. Hey, Kathy. Hey, Kate. Hey, did I tell you guys Dee Snider from Twisted Sister liked my tweet the other day? Another good one. Kate, you are right. Our viewers here are the best. You guys are the best.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing With All My
You
Heart.
really are. Morning, Mom. Hey, Ellen. Hey, Octavio, I should have been on that program. Well, we certainly got some rain at Graceland yesterday. Those of you who were there can attest. This is a last year picture. Michelle, you got it. May his memory be for a blessing. Oh, Marie, that's interesting. Oh, my heart. Do I think Anheuser-Busch did business with Al Capone? Maybe. They were more into taking over the smaller breweries. They probably wouldn't have worked with Capone directly. Oh, Katie, there will definitely be another 50 Ways to Die tour. In fact, I'm going over my route now. I'm up to about 70 Ways to Die on that tour. All vintage stuff too. I didn't want to include anybody recent. .104 weather golfing? Not that much of a masochist, jeez. Rainy night in Graceland, you got it, Bob. I'm still thinking of the guy who insisted on going on the march to the sea even though he had dysentery. The way we could rewrite marching through Georgia. And we stank the place up from Atlanta to the sea.
Benny Goodman goes way back and gets a lot of rhythm out of Walk, Jenny, Walk. Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Bingo card, that could be interesting. It could. So the trick with it is it's a longer tour. So I don't know if I want to, like, trim the route down a little bit, because it is a lot more walking. And I can get 50 Ways to Die from just about any route that we take. I still realize I still don't have a smallpox person. We could use a man like General Scheumann again. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome along. We're doing our third annual Pride Month in Chicago Cemeteries tour. Hey, Dad. Hey, Gene. Yeah, everybody, there's a cause of death for everybody. I just didn't want to repeat myself too much. I mean, there's a lot of pneumonia, a lot of heart failure, heart disease. A lot of stroke. I really wanted to work in stuff like evil, summer complaint, stuff that you don't hear about much anymore. Thanks to sanitation, vaccines, and antibiotics. More than April. Hey, Betsy. I do separate. There's multiple ways to die. There's the cholera wave of 1849, the cholera wave of 1854, and the cholera wave of 1866 are all represented. The 49, when I generally assume an 1849 grave is cholera, but it could also be smallpox or scarlet fever, too. There was a lot of that going around that year.
And they all loved it. They all loved those passions when they played by Benny Goodman. And now another one just in the same...
I will let Benny finish off one more tune. I got started a little bit late. I was getting my tea made. This is a kind of a shorter tour anyway. David, there's a lot of that. Just a lot of that. Well, really, anytime it's Summer Complaint, that's pretty much it. Hey, John. At least if you try peppermint lozenges, you'll smell better than the other corpses. Because it's not like the other options for fighting cholera at the time were much more efficacious. Morning, Jackie. Hey, Ebby. Oh, Michelle, sorry to hear that. Alright, we're letting Benny Goodman finish up this tune before we get started. Yeah, Karen, thanks for their service and all, but it doesn't make your shitty opinions better, Thanks, John. Happy Pride, Beth. All right, that's Benny wrapping it on up. So, it's from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. Benny Goodman, who learned to play the clarinet over at Hull House, which will come up in the course of this tour. In fact, so welcome along, everybody. I forgot that we had this video here. We'll go ahead and show this over at Graceland from last year. I'm always proud of Graceland Cemetery. I really am. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out. I'm on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time. So I am incredibly famous. You should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. And you know what I'm missing in this deck, since I haven't done this one since last Pride Month? We need to get the Graceland book in here. Among my books are Mysterious Chicago, the book, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil. Also won a Stonewall honor for one called Sparks under the name S.J. Adams a few years back. It's one of those, I think that one might hold up among my YA books. I try not to think about them anymore. It's like Faith No More used to say, the only way you really improve is if you become embarrassed by your previous work. But that one's all right. That and Play Me Backwards are my favorites out of mine. But also, the new Graceland Cemetery book. There's the image. It is now shipping. It's not officially out for another 6 weeks or so yet, but people who have ordered it have started to receive it. I've got... Oh, I do have a box of copies right here. See, I'm just too tired for this today. But here's two versions of it. Look how thick it is. And just look how well put together this book is. I am very pleased with how this one came out. Just the way I pictured it. So, all right, everybody. So today, since it is Pride Month, the Pride Parade is starting up in a couple hours here in Chicago. We are going to do Pride stories in Chicago cemeteries. Now, this can be a difficult thing to do because in a lot of cases, we can see people who are kind of coded as queer in obituaries and in newspaper stories, but it's never entirely clear. Really, anytime I see somebody who lived to the age of 90 and never married, I kind of get suspicious. But I know some people get really annoyed with historians saying, well, we don't know for sure. But the fact is, well, we don't know for sure. Relationships just in general, both straight and otherwise, were thought of very differently. People got married for different reasons in those days. So it's very, very difficult to tell for sure. But there are some people where it just seems fairly obvious. And one of my favorite examples is over at Forest Home Cemetery. I was really glad to find that this one was a marked grave. Just over through here is a woman named Viola. Look it up to the grave here. So this is Viola Larson. She's on here as Viola Elsie. Now, she died in well into the 1960s, lived to a ripe old age, but back at the turn of the 20th century, she was known as Sensational Viola. She was always getting into these schemes where she stole a rig full of horses just so she could write about what it was like to go to jail. Which nowadays we would say, yeah, sounds about white. And she would eventually learn that herself, but nobody was really talking about that stuff around the early 20th century when she was active. In particular, she was generally thought just to be aping the works of Mary MacLane, a sensational lesbian author who worked out of Montana in those days. And really, she largely was. But she was always getting involved in schemes like this, getting herself in trouble just so she would have something to write about, like joining a socialist organization just so she could write about it. But there's always this other angle. It wasn't just to write about it. Buried in some of the letters is that she was also doing it to impress girls that she had a crush on. This is one letter that she wrote to one of her friends. "You are beautiful. I say this much even if I am a girl. Girls can admire as well as men." This was another thing that she ended up getting in some trouble because some of the friends did not want to receive letters like this. But really reading through her stuff, it's I've almost never seen anybody coded quite so clearly lesbian, especially a teenager in that era. At one point, she was hired to write an autobiography for one of the newspapers, and it's very amusing to read now. Chapter 1. To begin with, I am queer. People have always said so, and I don't dispute them. To myself, I am simply myself. If to be oneself is to be queer, then I am queer, for I am always myself, which means that I think what I please and do as I please, no matter what other people think, say, or do. Chapter 2. Yes, I am queer. Now, in one way, she didn't mean it like this. She didn't mean it the way we would mean it today. On the other hand, yeah, she actually did, in fact. At one point, she got married just so she could write about it, and did not stay married for very long. Later, she made the news for offering to sell one of her fingers. Somebody was looking for a finger transplant, and she offered herself up. Then she just kind of disappears out of the news after this one from 1911. She disappeared out of the news for quite a long time, then suddenly popped up again in the 1930s when she won a Humane Medal. After she grew up, she became known as the Chicago Dog Lady, a sturdy, gray-haired woman of 50 who cared for more than 3,000 stray and abandoned dogs last year. Every day, she would get up and go out hunting for stray dogs that she could rescue, armed with a pistol to shoot off any intruders. Over the course of about a 30-year career doing this, she probably rescued tens of thousands of dogs. And one of my favorite things to find is the last time she appeared in the census, she was living over in Westtown with a woman who was her longtime roommate. So I love that this has a happy ending. Most of the writings that were referenced in the press never really came out. There's just little excerpts in the newspapers. They're not exactly literary masterpieces. They're just really fairly obviously Mary MacLane rips. But I really gotta wonder, when she was the dog lady of Chicago later in life, what would she have said if you asked about her old days as Sensational Viola? I wonder if she would have just kind of thought back on that and laughed, just go, oh no, don't bring that stuff up. In any case, the story has a happy ending, and I love that for her. Another case, also out at Shalom Memorial Park, one that we'll be covering on the probably the time travel pub crawl this weekend, is Nelise Rosenfeld, who wrote under the name Nelise Child and was better known as Lillian Colley in Chicago, the proprietress of the Wind Blue Inn over on Michigan Avenue. there she is with Virginia Harrison, who was described in the press as her aide. Now, it's generally been assumed that that was her girlfriend, and it's kind of possible. There's occasionally newspapers would give Virginia Lillian's last name as well. Now, but it's not known for sure. Eventually, Virginia torched The Wind Blew In, apparently after they had some sort of fight, then went off with a bank robber and got involved in bank robbing dealings for the rest of her life, or at least until she disappears off of the record. Lillian herself, I managed to track down. She disappeared herself from the record in the 1920s after making a name for herself as a flapper. Finally found out that she had changed her name, gotten married a couple of times, and became a Broadway playwright and a mystery novelist. And at the time her son was still around, I was able to contact him and ask, the question we've all been wondering is, she and Virginia, were they? And he thought for a second, then, that would have explained a lot. And then noted a couple of other women that he strongly suspected she might have had an affair with over the course of her life. And in any case, he did note that she wasn't bothered a bit in the 1970s when he came out as gay himself. Which for the 1970s, that's certainly very progressive. We'll move back over to Graceland here and climb up the hill. Well, Ava, the history of the word queer is a long and complicated one. People have taken to using it a little more now, partly because the younger generation does, and partly because it's very difficult to say LGBTQIA+, honestly, with a straight face. I mean, we're up to a third of the alphabet there, just about. But here is Charles Roget Smith. He was a paper company president. But his daughter was cremated here at Graceland, but is not buried at Graceland. His daughter was Mary Roget Smith. Here she is with Jane Addams, her longtime partner. Mary was one of the early funders of Hull House, where Jane Addams effectively invented American social work. Mary herself, in particular, was a major funder for starting the Hull House Music School, where Benny Goodman, who entertained us during the pre-show, learned how to play the clarinet. The two of them were companions for life. Exactly the nature of their relationship is kind of difficult to gauge because most of the letters were burned, but Jane was known to refer to Mary as her wife. They lived together, they owned houses together. One biography of Jane Addams recently, a biographer was asked and had what I think was a very good response to this. She said, if you ask me if I think Jane Addams was a lesbian, I would say yes, but the question, would she identify with what we call a lesbian today? That's a more difficult question. And that is a more difficult question. A lot of times we're just trying to superimpose very 21st century concepts of relationships on people who just wouldn't have been familiar with that sort of thing. And it comes up quite a bit. A lot of people that I research here, it seems fairly clear that what they might call themselves today, but in their day they didn't really have the vocabulary for that. Like, we'll go over here, there's an unmarked space, kind of near where this cylindrical one is. There's an unmarked space for a mystery novelist and big game hunter named Mary Hastings Bradley. Now, she was a popular author in her time, and according to her daughter, was definitely known to engage in affairs with women. Her daughter went on to have a long career as a science fiction writer under the name James Tiptree Jr. And the fact that James Tiptree Jr. was really a woman named Alice was a really well-kept secret. James was carrying on long correspondences with people like Ursula K. Le Guin for years, who did not find out until much later that it was really a woman named Alice. Now, based on some of the comments made in her letters, it's difficult to know, of course, but it's highly probable, I think, that she would probably identify as trans today. But once again, we'll never really know for sure. She's no longer with us to correct me. In another case, one of my favorites to talk about, also up at Graceland Cemetery. As Judy, you left out the plus there. But we talk, this is on nearly every Graceland tour, the Getty Mausoleum. But it's almost always on there just because of Louis Sullivan's incredible architecture. And of course, there's a lot more going on than this. I need to look up the causes of death of the three people in here, because it is right on the route. I could just kind of mention it in passing. So I got this in my head. The 50 ways to die at Graceland could be 100 ways to die at Graceland. I'm up to about 70 right now just on the route. Most of them are just kind of mentioned as we go, like pneumonia, heart attack. But in this is Alice Getty, the daughter of Henry Getty, who built the mausoleum. He was a lumberman. Now, Alice was an art collector. She and her father became experts in Asian art. She initially wanted to be a composer herself and had some sheet music that was published, but then switched gears in the 1910s and became a real expert on Buddhism and Buddhist art. She wrote a book called The Gods of Northern Buddhism, Their History, Iconography, and Progressive Evolution Across the Northern Buddhist Countries. I might have left out a word in there, but it was published by Oxford University Press. It's a very erudite, scholarly sort of book, but it's still available today. It's still considered an early authority on that subject. For a while, she switched gears. During World War I, she was living in France and started a Braille printing press for soldiers who had been blinded in the war. Following that, in the 1920s, she lived for a while in a monastery in Japan of an obscure Buddhist sect that still isn't that well understood. In the 1930s, she was working on a manuscript about them when the Nazis raided her villa in France and are thought to have destroyed the manuscripts. She drifted back to New York, where she never married but spent the last years of her life studying Ilana, the Syrian goddess of love, with a woman who was her study partner. Which, again, we don't really have enough information to say one way or the other here, but study partner gives us certain ideas in the 21st century. Now, one of them the next one over, I have to update a little bit. We'll pass Edith Rockefeller McCormick here, and we'll just kind of start here. I'll skip ahead a bit. Past the Higginbothams, past the Cranes, past Toilet Baron Richard Crane there on the right. I still occasionally come across crane toilets. Libraries tend to have them around Chicagoland. That study partner wrote an obituary of Alice that's about the last thing that was really written about her. But over here was a space that was unmarked last time I did this tour, but it has now been marked for a man by the name of David Lee Hull, philosopher. He taught at Northwestern University, where he was taught the philosophy of biology. He was kind of a pioneer in that field, and his writings in it are still considered relevant after 40 or 50 years, which is pretty remarkable in academia for anything to still be relevant after all that time. But when asked later in life about his work in philosophy of biology, he would just say, boring, and want to talk much more about his experiences as a gay man in Chicago in the mid-20th century. Now, the story he liked to tell was that there were really only two places that he knew of in the 50s. They were located right about where the Clark Bar would later be, right next to the site of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. There was one for gay men called Scarlet Ribbons, and one for lesbians called Volleyballs. They were separated by like a swinging saloon door. And the way he described it is Scarlet Ribbons would be gay men dancing their heads off, then Volleyballs would be 6 women getting in a fight. Raids on the place were very, very common. David lost his partner. His partner was one of the first AIDS casualties, and he was just astounded by how callous and how bad the medical community was treating AIDS patients at the time. They didn't even tell him initially he had AIDS until he realized he was dying and started mentioning something about donating his body to science, and the doctor said, they don't take AIDS patients. So he eventually opened his home as a hospice, and during the height of the crisis, there were sometimes dozens of people living inside of his house. One person described him as being 5'2" and the biggest man I ever met. David himself managed to survive. He later said he cut off all sexual contact completely when AIDS came around. His grave has finally been marked now with this quote, "Alas, poor world, what treasure hath thou lost?" That's from Shakespeare's Venus and Adonis. A couple others who are a bit better documented. For one, we'll pass over Ludwig Mies van der Rohe here. This just happens to be the footage I have, with the plain black rectangle that perfectly suits his architectural style. And next to him is the one sometimes called the Star Trek grave, with this fantastic piece of cullet, Bruce Goff. Bruce Goff was a mid-20th century architect, the same time period as Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, but his buildings look like this. Vanderohe made plain black boxes. Bruce Goff made these absolutely incredible pieces of really wild architecture. Stuff like this was mostly private homes, so he's not really as well known now. He's not as well known as people who made skyscrapers, but he's developed kind of a cult following over the years, and a couple of years back there was a retrospective of his works at University of Oklahoma, which insists that it wasn't because he was gay that he was fired from working there in the 1950s. But frankly, I don't know if anybody's actually buying that that was not really the case. Goff was a fun guy. He liked to build with a building material called cullet, which is the runoff of glass bending ovens. That's actually a piece of cullet from one of his buildings that burned down on the gravestone there. It's the second one. There was one that got stolen, I believe. There was, when they were working on his monument here, his admirers were designing it. At one point, they wanted his epitaph to be one of his quotes about his work as an architect. He said, "I've had more influences than an alley cat." Guy with a good sense of humor. They talked about like the International School of Architecture at the time that really wanted to show all of the bones of the building, wanted to show all the structural support and use that as ornamentation. And he said, "I admit that structure can be beautiful, but a human skeleton can be beautiful, but who wants to shake hands with it?" Well, maybe he shouldn't ask that to this particular crowd out here. Let's just move over from Cockrell briefly. Move over from Goff briefly. Just a couple over. Well, for one thing, keep your eye on that one back behind us. I'm not sure how well you can see the one I'm thinking of. No, you can't. There's a guy back there, it's a Greek character that says 1 foot in fairyland. I don't know anything about the guy not being straight, but I have suspicions. But we'll just leave that alone. John Cockrell, we know for sure. John Cockrell was an interior designer and a furniture designer in the 1980s. This is a table that he designed. You can kind of see it's a lot of he described his stuff as stark and steely, a reflection of the electronic age of the 1980s. Here he is with one of his tables. But as much as he tried to make stuff that really blended in with 1980s styles, there's also articles in the news where he talked about like adding plants and soft furniture to places that were architecturally harsh that just added layers of softness on the inside of them. And he's one situation, one case where we do know that he was gay. He died in 1988, fairly early in the AIDS crisis, relatively early. That's one we know for sure as well. There's other people where the cause of death is not given. You just note that in the obituary, in lieu of flowers, donations are asked to be made to an AIDS group. But that's not necessarily a smoking gun, but it's probable. And similarly, there's a lot of people where there's just not exactly a smoking gun, but we wonder. Like, this isn't the grave of Nellie Verne Walker. Nellie Verne Walker was the sculptor here. And she lived almost 100 years. She was 99 when she died in 1973. Never married and said, "I simply have never met a man who was as interesting as my work." Which I think is a great line. She was a protege of Laredo Taft. But again, that's really about all that we know. I'm still trying to find more. I just realized you can see the pride flag down here, down at the base of this one. This is the one you see probably the most clearly when you were going past Graceland Cemetery on the red line. Like if you're heading down to the Pride Parade from the north side after this. So, this is Pierce Anderson. Now, notably, you don't really see his name on there. You have to really go looking for it. A guy just pointed out to me in the cemetery. You look up close, the name is on there if you look closely. The names and the dates. For Pierce Anderson was an architect. He's the Anderson and Graham Anderson Probst and White, the company that was behind things like the Wrigley Building, and after his death, the Merchandise Marts, the Old Main Post Office. Lots of buildings like that. A lot of great stuff from the Art Deco era. And I really couldn't find out much about this guy. I know that he was unmarried at the time of his death and survived by his sister, but I'm assuming that the fact that there is the rainbow flag planted there right now means that somebody else out there knows something that I don't. But we'll also say, back behind the Kimballs here, another one who is commonly referred to now by his biographers as being likely gay, but we just don't know enough for sure. We'll zip on back. Louis-Henri Sullivan. Now, really what we're going on with it is that he had one brief unhappy marriage, was attracted to beautiful design elements, We don't really know much, but he just fits a lot of stereotypes. Biographers generally seem to agree that it was probably the case, but there's not really that much to go on. And sometimes I feel weird when we're just kind of basing this on known stereotypes. Like there's the case of Grace Carr. One of a few mausoleums built specifically for a woman. This is over at Forest Home Cemetery. Not much is known about Grace Carr, but we know that she was up at about middle age and fairly well off when she died during a fishing trip. Was single and probably died wearing a flannel. That's pretty stereotypically lesbian. She she left all of her money to her employers, which just strikes me as absolutely absurd. I think it might have struck the employers as absolutely absurd as well, because I think they just spent it all buying her a mausoleum. These things were not cheap. Another guy we at least have some stray quotes from. The bench here is for the Lyon family. John Lyon was a Board of Trade guy. And his son Billy Lyons was similarly a Board of Trade guy for a while, but then he got out of that and found more lucrative work that he didn't have to work as hard at. Because he wasn't really interested in doing the work. What he really wanted to do was go hang out with theater people and hang out at his gentlemen's clubs. And he was later known to say he never married because a man who enjoys club life and the company of stage people as well as I do has no right to marry. Which sounds like a thing to me. So other people, we have just these stray quotes that go around. So we'll get over to the Newberry family plot here. And one person who's actually not buried at this plot is Walter Newberry's daughter, Julia Newberry, who wrote a really terrific diary. And also a sketchbook called The Life of Two Future Old Maids, where she imagined a life where she and her cousin lived together without any men allowed, and also no children. No children allowed in the house whatsoever. She had a couple of quotes like this that led some descendants to suspect as much. And you can see this was edited by Tracy Mygatz, who would have been the cousin, Minnie Clapp's daughter, I believe. And Tracy, we got the image here. Mygatz said, "My cousin Minnie Clapp and I have long since decided that we will never marry but be two jolly old maids in a house of our own. We do not expect to be melancholy, but to give balls, dinners, and every sort of entertainment except tea fights." I don't know what a tea fight is, but it sounds fun, honestly. "We shall be happy to receive visits from all our friends, young and old bachelors, married and unmarried ladies. Everybody except children." But we can take this a little more seriously because Tracy Mygatz herself was a founder of one of the organizations that eventually became the American Civil Liberties Union. Tracy Mygatz herself is a fairly well-respected early lesbian writer. A couple others we know of at Graceland that are a bit better documented. Mostly the more recent ones. What I tend to find is you'll find them in the single sections. The more recent ones, more recent interments, are much more likely to have things like partners in life. This is Richard H. Brown and William Lloyd Barber. Now, Richard H. Brown was the vice president of the Newberry Libraries, one of the people credited with kind of creating the modern independent research library concept. In the 1960s, he wrote a book called The Hero and the People, The Age of Jacksonian Democracy. To the right is his partner, William Lloyd Barber, a Vietnam Air Force veteran, and also the first male kindergarten teacher in the northern Chicagoland area. These two were partners for 38 years and married for 7 of them. There's a few others that kind of look like that nearby. Randy Scott Johnson and David Schlichman, partners in life. And another one over here for Lester Sabo, who was also a Vietnam veteran. And don't know much about that other than just beloved friend of Scott. In the 90s, some people still felt like they had to be very cagey about these sort of things. Other older ones that we know about that are a little better documented. Watch out for the spin here. We will walk past the plot of Carolyn Kirkland, Madam X, the gossip columnist, seen here with what can only be described as a shit-eating grin. But nearby her, up here on the rock, up here on the outcropping, the plateau, is her friend, Arthur Meeker Jr. Now, Arthur Meeker Jr. grew up on Prairie Avenue kind of at the tail end of the Gilded Age. He approached the Gilded Age with kind of detachment, whereas his mother, Grace Murray Meeker, was always ready to tell stories about great old parties of the 19th century. Arthur kind of viewed it from a detached air. That's really very amusing. He would talk about how Potter Palmer's liver-colored mansion had no more taste than anybody else of the 19th century. Like a lot of kids of his generation, he believed that taste in the Victorian age was just at an all-time low. Time had not passed enough for Victorian stuff to look cool again. But Arthur later became a novelist and a travel writer himself. We know from his letters that this is one that we can put a pride flag on. Now, a more interesting case is the guy that Madam X said was the most eligible bachelor in Chicago. Oh, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here. Just cover briefly, there's Arthur Ryerson, who was lost on the board to the Titanic. Next to him is his sister, Eleanor, who was actually buried in Massachusetts. She never married, but lived with her very close friend for most of her life in Boston. There used to be a term Boston marriage, which was what they called it when two women set up housekeeping together. In Eleanor's case, it seems to have been quite literally a Boston marriage. But just down the hill from them is a plot that would have been owned by but does not include the guy that Madam X said was the most eligible bachelor in Chicago. This is Samuel Allerton, who is the founder of the Union Stockyards, and his two wives, Pamela and Agnes, who also happen to be sisters. He married both of them at various times. But his only son, born 1873 and lived clear up to the 1960s, was Robert Allerton. Now, Robert Allerton and a friend of his decided to quit college and just go to Europe to study art. He was a rich man's son. You could do that kind of thing. But he had grown up also in that Prairie Avenue set. He eventually met a man that became his partner for life, and officially they couldn't get married, but they were sometimes considered the first legally recognized same-sex couple. A judge allowed him to adopt his partner. And exactly what the nature of their relationship was is difficult to gauge today. They both had their ashes scattered in Hawaii, though they were the owners of this plot. After Samuel's death, it passed to Robert, and then in the Graceland archives, there's still a lot of stuff about the name change paperwork and stuff, establishing that Robert's partner eventually became the sole trustee of that plot. And just up the road from there a bit is possibly the first monument in the city, I think, that was specifically to a same-sex couple. This is Charles Harris and Jack Goodall. Jack was a 33-year employee of the Lyric Opera. The line at the bottom is Tosca. When Jack died, there was a a tribute performance of Tosca at the opera to him. It translates to, I lived for art, I lived for love, I never hurt a living soul. There's a similar, another larger monument to a couple is over at Rose Hill Cemetery. And this is Michael DePaolo and Larry Seawald. Now, Larry worked for NBC and met Michael in that capacity. They were remembered as a very domesticated couple who lived on the Gold Coast and were absolutely a riot to be around. Unfortunately, Larry died of complications due to AIDS in 1990. Michael DePaolo designed the monument to the two of them, and then died of AIDS himself a few years later, complications due to AIDS. And then there's a few of them where I just haven't figured out for sure. We'll just note the coyote here. It's a shared marker sometimes if it's two. I haven't found one yet that was for a lesbian couple. I found a couple with two women's names, but it'll turn out to be mother and daughter or something. We've got this one with a peace sign I just love, Joseph and Robert Toira. I haven't found too much about them yet. There's also Ron Reist and Rick Brown, partners in life. James Ray Scarborough, whose obituary makes a big deal about him being a dear friend of a guy named Scott. Now, all with these ones, with the dates, late 80s, early 90s, we can kind of assume what the situation was here. These are probably AIDS casualties. And I feel like people my age are just kind of coming to grips with the fact that how much this shaped our whole idea of sexuality coming of age right at the time when the AIDS crisis was right at its worst. Oh, that didn't. I skipped one there. Okay. Wasn't planning to skip it. Got one more. But just over here is an architect named George Veranda, who mostly did private residences. I don't have much pictures of his work. But George Veranda died of lung cancer in 1984. At this point, I wasn't able to clean up his remains enough. But his partner next to him, Roger Brown, died of complications due to AIDS in 1997. Roger Brown grew up in Alabama, where his parents kind of discouraged his interest in the arts, but his grandparents, he was a lot closer to. But he left Alabama pretty much immediately after high school and became a painter. He studied at the Art Institute for several years, but was still influenced by like the Art Deco stuff, the old broken down Art Deco things he would see as a kid, and painted things like this, Rising Above It All, which is a really cool view of Chicago, or my particular favorite, Christ's Entry into Chicago. I love this. We got these stylized versions of the Chase Tower, the Sears Tower, the AMA building, the Aon Tower, the Tribune building. It's probably Water Tower Place next to the Hancock building there. And here comes Jesus on a flatbed truck, ready to make a speech with Mayor Daley. Such a cool painting. And here's a picture of Roger himself with his dog Elvis. Elvis was a distant cousin of Roger's, according to a couple of articles. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, that is the Pride Month in Chicago Cemeteries tour. I want to talk about some upcoming ones, and we'll kind of continue this theme on Thursday night when we're doing a Pride edition of the Time Travel Pub Crawl. Now, I've got a couple of bits of new footage of it. Mostly it's going to be places we've been to before, but it's places we haven't been to before in a long time. So we'll put that together as well as we can. And I don't have another in-person one scheduled right now. Would people show up if I did the Rose Hill one again next weekend? It's kind of an X factor when it's 4th of July weekend. But that's my guess, is maybe I can do the new route at Rose Hill again next weekend. But all right, everybody, so thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. We'll put the Benny Goodman back on, who learned to play clarinet thanks to the efforts of Mary Roget Smith. I feel like a lot of people are out of town next weekend. Maybe I should give myself a break. Thanks, Marita. Thanks, Kathy. Have a good time at the pool, Gene. Gail, the name of that artist was Roger Brown. The thing is, if I take a break, I don't make money. But I got a couple of private gigs this week. There's a couple of private virtual tours. Picking up a boat tour shift. Marie, answer those questions. I wouldn't go anywhere, I just wouldn't run an in-person tour that weekend. David, one that I just pick up a shift for now and then. I kind of wish I hadn't. I picked up a few Wednesdays, kind of wish that I hadn't. Thanks, Don. All right, Mom. Not that, I'd rather not say which company it is. It's just one that I do to say in practice, so I can do the Mystericon boat tour and do it as well as I can. If I haven't done the tour in like a year or so, I probably won't do it as well as if I'd done it a few times over the course of the year. It's interesting doing it with, like, I'm kind of used to doing it with a very engaged audience, and on a usual boat tour in Chicago, half of the audience probably doesn't even speak English. So it's much harder to connect with the crowd. Yeah, what I really need is a day to clean my apartment. It has gotten completely away from me in the last couple of weeks. Susan, picnics, it's kind of, don't make too much of a production out of it. I don't think we could do like an organized picnic there. Well, anyway, we got to use the McCormick Wilderness for something though. So, thank you, April. Ah, Jan, glad to hear it. Now, where is Miles? Let me go find that boy. Miles, I bet you're in the closet, aren't you? Well, in the grand tradition of Miles of the Pride Tour, Miles had to come out of the closet. But come on, Miles, it's your contract. Days and squeezy treats. No weekend to be in the closet, Miles. That's true. I do plan to do an Oak Woods tour pretty soon. Maybe I'll do that in a couple weeks. Yeah, that's the thing. Miles.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about it. Trucking.
Make this sign a little smaller and less obtrusive. The thing about Rebecca is that sometimes you pick a place where you're doing where you're out of the way. The caretakers just don't have much to do. So, oh, the Jewish section cleanup in Oakwood has been confirmed. That's good to hear.
All over town.
You see them shuffling, shuffling, chugging along. It spread like a forest blaze, became a craze and sank to Harlem now.
Oh, we can party by Frank W. John W. Norton too at All Saints. Picnic on the detective's grave. That's kind of cool. But I don't know, man. Cemetery ants. That just seems like some dark magic stuff right there. Christine, the trick with Forest Homes is just so big. big and inaccessible to public transit. Thanks, Chris. That's my sister's fiance. Happy Pride.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
Yeah, I gotta get all the information. If somebody could like email me all of the relevant links to the Mysiricon stuff. I don't honestly have them myself, but I should be able to get them up on the webpage. Miles is pretty easy going unless he sees other cats. Then he'll do a little bit of hissing. Chrissy, that's probably wise. Get it in quick. Before Clarence Thomas can drop another one. I still haven't refixed my kitchen. I've just been too tired. But they replaced the back door and had to move everything around. I just finally hung the coats back up. Have a good day, Bob. Count Basie, I love it, Marty.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago and dance some more to Benny Goodman and his orchestra, and hear Helen Ward sing Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo.
Hey, congrats, Kathleen. Thank you, Christine. What type of pie do I eat on? I don't have a type of pie right now. Maybe I should go get some pie. I gotta go out and get more cat food anyway, so. Valley sings it, wise men wings it, even Mr. Crosby sings it. Oh, Kathleen, that's just a few weeks out. They're not starving, they're just, their usual nightly treats are in short supply right now. and they would not be pleased. Let us just say.
And we'll let the title speak for itself.
Yeah, those squeezy little cat Go-Gurt things. I feel like we got another supply of them around here someplace, but I don't know where. Yeah, Christy, there's not a case before the courts right now that would overturn it, though I imagine Texas will be filing something any day now. I saw Texas's Attorney General saying sanity reigns in Texas. Grown men wear cowboy hats and expect to be taken seriously in Texas. Not even when they're like playing folk music or something. It's one thing when you're playing folk music, but... No, yeah, Octavio, as soon as I start cooking dinner, Priya knows it's time for squeezy treats and opens her campaign of howling. Have a good day, Gail. Gail. Peggy, I can't say that for the good people in Texas. The good people in Texas, I think, outnumber the bad ones. They've just been manipulated out of voting so badly with all the gerrymandering and etc. The bad people have kept hold on power this whole time. I mean, Georgia should have been a blue state a long time ago. There hasn't been a free and fair election in Georgia, ever. This last one was about as close as it's ever come. We never should have taken federal troops out in 1877. That's all I can say. Marita, have a good time. I want to see the new Elvis movie. I hear it's terrible. I can't wait. Was it Karen? It was already there. I'm Bedma, Lisa.
On Michigan Avenue in Chicago. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
Well, Eddie, you got a chance to get rid of Ron Johnson anyway, that Johnson. It was only a 2-minute roll. That's what she said. That's what John Wilkes Booth said. All right, Benny is wound up, so I think I will just plug once again, upcoming on Thursday night. We haven't done a time travel pub crawl in a while. These days, the The numbers on them are way down, but I still feel like I want to do the Pride one. And maybe in person next weekend. Maybe we'll just wait till the next weekend because we got the 4th of July coming up, and I got enough going on anyway. But all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tour saying stay safe, stay strong, be gay, do crimes, and stay spooky.